And so all of a sudden it quickly became our plan A. But I thank God for that. I don't know if I would have the same drive to go after it as hard as I did.
Welcome, everyone, to the Closing Table podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals from across the country, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Coti Brown, a real estate agent in the mid-Michigan area. Coti, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Kat. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Coti, you have a really impressive story. I think something a lot of agents would aspire to. You have your own company with your husband. You are one of the top 1% agents in the state. You have sold 500 homes in 5 years, and you have a 22,000 followers on Instagram. How'd you do it?
It's so funny because I think that's the thing that impresses my kids the most
Yeah.
is the different followers I have on different social media platforms, which is hilarious to me. But, honestly, the thing that I find the most impressive is when we go out in public and people, they know us, not necessarily even by what we do in real estate, but they know what we've done in the community. They know how we've poured back in the community. My husband's actually currently out at our food pantry because he serves at our food pantry every single week, and getting recognized for those things is so much cooler than the followers on Instagram.
Certainly. And you have a really interesting story overall. And I know you've told it a lot of places, and maybe even here previously when you were on the podcast before. And we're so happy to have you back. But for maybe those of you who haven't heard your story, could you tell us a bit about your journey into real estate?
Yeah. So my journey in real estate, life looks so different in the rearview mirror. And when I look at it, I really feel like my journey started when I was a little kid. I grew up, I was the only child of a single mom that literally still to this day has never owned a house. And so we moved from apartments to trailers, to different apartments. I moved like 20 sometimes before I even graduated high school. And so I can remember being that kid that would, in the backseat of a car as we're driving by houses, sometimes I would even pick out the dumpiest house and I would just go, yeah, but if we could just own that one and never have to move again. Right. And that kind of followed me throughout the years where I just thought real estate was pretty cool. I mean, in high school, we had a project in shop where we had to make our dream house, and every other kid in the class made these crazy, amazing 20-story homes, pools on the rooftop, tons of garages. And I just made this little 2-bedroom ranch that I remember my shop teacher, God bless him, probably still was like, oh, you poor thing. Cause I was like, I just want this home. Like, I just want a home. And I think that truly is so many Americans' dreams, right? And especially in the market like we have right now with affordability and supply and demand being such an issue. I think there's so many kids that were like me, parents that were like my mom, that just want to be able to afford a home, for goodness sake. And so anyway, I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do. I went off to college. I started a career in banking, and it was years into that where I decided I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I was blessed enough to get to stay home with our girls and for 4 years. And when I decided to come back into the workforce, I had all this, pent up of 30 years of life going, okay, if I'm not going to do it now, when? And there was a lot of things that told me not to. I was almost 40. I had 3 small kids still. I had a 4-year-old still that was only going to daycare or school care part of the time. And I just thought, I need to do this. It's something that I've always thought of. I think there's so many people like me that watch HGTV and they think, gosh, can I do this? Like, this is something that's really entertaining. And now granted, the job looks nothing like HGTV, right? But, and I'd always had this want, again, because of my upbringing, to have a career that I could pull my husband into, that we could work together, that we could have the lifestyle as parents that I never got to have as a kid. And I know we joke about flexibility in real estate because it's flexible, but it's not. But the reality is I wanted something where every day I could wake up and Ty and I could walk our girls to school together. And then we could work during the day, and every day we could go and pick our girls up from school together, and we could have that precious time that I didn't get to have, and I wanted to help other people with getting that home that they drove by that they dreamed of, you know? And so anyway, I got into real estate. I knew this is going to sound weird, but I knew that I would be successful because I knew how badly I wanted to help other people that were just like me. But I had no idea that it was going to be our plan A so quickly because Ty had a good job. And it was about 3 months, not even 2, 3 months into it, where his job was being eliminated. And so all of a sudden it quickly became our plan A. But I thank God for that because I don't know if I would have had the same drive had I not had a backup. You know, if I had a backup plan, I don't know if I would have the same drive to go after it as hard as I did.
Right. So you were very, purpose driven. It was this or bust.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny because I've had agents over the years, they've gone and, we'll lay out their business plan. We'll talk about what they want to do. And they'll say, well, I get so many agents. It's such an honor where they'll come and say, I want to do business just like you. I want to be like you, which is so cool. It's so weird and so cool at the same time. But I've said to them, well, tell me about your home situation or your finances. And usually they have a partner of some sort that has a good job and they've always thought about real estate. They've done it now because they feel safe enough to do it. And I said, the hard part is you want to do business like me. You're going to have to find something that drives inside of you. Then you need to go home and act like your spouse doesn't have a job. You need to go home and only have enough money in the bank for the next month. You need to go home and look at your 3 kids and be like, if I don't get out there and start helping people, I'm not going to have money to pay my mortgage or to feed my kids because that was my life. That was our reality. And honestly, I think that's why so many folks get into this industry don't do as well because they don't have that same kind of urgency and that same kind of fire. And this business, it can take, the average agent, I think at this point in time makes less than 60,000 a year. I mean, I think it was 40 last year, but, that's not enough for people to sustain. But the reality is there are plenty of agents just like me that within their first year are making multiple 6 figures. And you just get to decide which one you want to be. It's the coolest thing about this gig is there is absolutely no ceiling. There's none. You can make as much money as you want. But guess what? There's also no floor, right? So you can make as little money as you put into it as well. But yeah, it was one of the most interesting things to just have that light switch go off and say, okay, now something you thought you were getting into for a backup plan or for fun and at your own pace, like now it's full steam ahead.
Right. And then I've heard you tell this story. You even had your broker told you in your first year, you came to them with this plan and they said, you're not going to be able to do it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did that just light a fire in you?
It did. And I think that, I've been that person since I was a kid. If somebody tells me I can't do something or, probably sometimes shouldn't do something, I'm not good at receiving that kind of information. But the problem was I had sat down and figured out what's Ty's salary, what are our bills. Before I got into real estate, when I was a stay-at-home mom, I used to sling wraps and vitamins, which was such a funny story in and of itself. Because I went from being a corporate executive to staying home with our kids to doing an MLM, and everybody, I swear, thought I lost my mind. They're like, "What are you doing? Going from like finance executive to now this?" But it was just enough money that I could make staying at home with our girls to support being home and then just Ty's salary. So when I got into real estate, I just reverse engineered the numbers. I said, okay, this first year, I'll never forget, I needed to get to a place where I made $350,000. And I went and took it and said, okay, the average price of a home is this. The average commission is this. My broker split is this amount. My fees are this amount. Taxes, insurance, like everything. I'd had an entire spreadsheet, which is very unique because I'm not that kind of person, quite frankly. But I couldn't afford for this to fail was the problem. I just felt like that Eminem song where it's like, this is my one shot. This is my one shot to prove this is going to work. And otherwise, Ty was going to be out getting another job for, and probably one of the other big 3. And he was going to be traveling many times out of the month. And I didn't want that. That's not what I wanted our life to look like. And so when I reverse engineered all those numbers, it came down to 50 houses at the time. And so I went and I said, this is what I'm going to sell. I'm going to sell 50 houses. And they looked it over and ripped it up and said, you're going to need to go back to the drawing board because nobody is going to sell 50 houses in their first year. That's just not how this works. And so I took it on that. I literally took it home in these pieces and I taped it back up and I made a clean copy of it. And then I started charting every single house that I sold that year. And I did it. I sold 51 houses my very first year. But every year since, I've continued that commitment to reverse engineer my numbers, figure out exactly what we need to make as a family for our goals. And I think no matter what, specifically in real estate, but no matter what profession you're in, if you don't set your GPS for the life that you want, you don't go, this is where I want to go, right? You're not going to get anywhere. I mean, it's no different than if I get in my car and say, I want to go someplace warm. Well, there's like 40 states that are warm. Pick one, right? As agents, I don't know how many times I'll hear them say, well, I just want to make good money. Well, what's good money to you? Because good money to you and good money to me are totally different things. So although I'm not a numbers person, I am an options person. And my options were very focused. My option was I wanted the opportunity to get up and with my husband have a relaxed morning, get our kids, go to school. I wanted the option to work from anywhere at any time with him, right? And I wanted that option to bring our kids home from school. I wanted the option for summers to be enjoyable. And those options have dollar signs attached to them. So I had to know how much it cost is really what it boiled down to. I will say I look up that broker's numbers every year and make sure I'm beating them still to this day.
I can't believe they ripped it up. Like when you first said it, I was like, oh, metaphorically ripped it up. It's like, nope. Right. Should have made a copy first. Right. Jeez, oh, Pete. So for agents who come to you and they want to simulate your success and you tell them like you have to find that drive, do you find that a lot of them are able to, or are some just, it seems like maybe a bit of a personality trait you just have to have?
I do think that with the right fuel, I feel like anybody can find it. I do. I do think it takes nobody can do it for you. It takes some self-searching, and I think in our microwave society of life being so busy and so fast that many of us don't spend very much time alone or still to figure out what do we really want out of life. And if I'm being brutally honest, even though that was like a light switch for me at that moment, that was like 10, 15 years of burning, like a slow burn through corporate America going, I'm okay. I'm happy. I'm content. But man, I do not feel on fire for my life right now. Like I don't get that burning desire to just go after my goals. Right. And so I think many of us live that life. Many of us live in a place, and especially agents, we live in a place that's, we're content, but we're not just like on fire about what we're doing. So I think if we tend to I give agents business plans. I ask them, I said, you've got to take time to really take time out and be still and find out what drives you and what are you excited about? I always say, like, what would you run through a brick wall for? Like if my current lifestyle that I have right now that I prayed about and worked my tail off for, if all of a sudden my business fell apart and things changed, I would run through a brick wall in order to get my lifestyle back, like the life that we have now. So what is that for people? Now, that being said, you can't do it for anybody. So I've definitely had agents that, and I think there's some folks that get into it. Yeah, I think if they're chasing money, I think it's the number one reason for people to fail. Because it's not an immediate gratification kind of business, right? It has a life cycle to it. It is amazing. I think it's the best thing anybody can ever do is get their license, but it is not immediate. And my plan or my path was very quick for most. An average agent doesn't close a deal for their first 6 months, but usually what happens from there is they snowball. But to have that stamina to stick it out so that they actually can reap the rewards of everything that they've worked towards. It's really hard for a lot of agents. Most of us before this, we were used to working Monday through Friday and getting a paycheck on Friday. That's just not how this industry works.
Certainly. And something else you've talked about doing before is you and your family do vision boards, mm-hmm. right? So you do that every year to kind of help reset. Is that something you also advise your agents you work with to do?
Absolutely. So we have, visually, you can look all these numbers up. Statistically, you're like 96% more likely to accomplish your goals if they're in front of you every single day. Ours, my husband and I's, are typically saved on our phone because we're on our phones all the time. So we see them. If you turn you this way, you see in my back, you can see it's part of my numbers of my vision board back there. But we also do just flat out visions, right? Where we have just the pictures of vacations we want to take, things we want to do as a family. We started this a long time ago when our girls were really little. I think it's incredibly important. I think the world tells us constantly what we should be doing and what we should, be okay with. And we don't dream nearly enough, And so we wanted to instill that in our kids very early on. Our first vision board with our youngest had hot dogs all over it. She just wanted to eat as many hot dogs as she could that year. But I've seen it because I've literally lived it. Every year that I've put down the numbers that I've wanted to, and I've gone in and said, okay, so what kind of activities is that going to take? It's one thing to do your vision board. That's half the battle. But then knowing what it is that you want, okay, what activities is it going to take you to get there? So you got to find out what's measurable. Early on, one of the easiest things I did, because again, we were broke, right? Husband lost a job. I'm newly licensed. I'm in a new area, so I didn't know anybody. I said, what can I do that's going to cost me the least and get me the most conversion? And that was getting to know people in our community. And so I just went and took everybody that would ever accept out to coffee. I went to diner coffee most of the time, not like Starbucks bougie coffee. I went to like 99-cent coffee. But I got to know everybody, and the conversion ratio on that, because you're not just marketing to people, but you're marketing through them. You get to know them, Then I was able to measure that and say, okay, every 10 coffees, I end up with 2 more referrals. Every 2 referrals, I end up with, X amount of pendings. So you start to be able to track things and measure it, but it has to start with that vision, because again, if you don't set your intention, you're going to end up nowhere. Right? If you just say, I just want to go out into the world and tell everybody I'm a realtor and that will bring me, people that want to buy and sell, it won't. You do have to have measurables to your actual outcome. So then, and also so you can know if you're spending your time not wisely. If you're saying, oh gosh, I'm spending all this time here, but I've seen no conversion from it. Well, you have to know where that time was spent so you can cut that time out.
Wow, we're really getting to the good part, and I can't wait for you to hear what comes next. But first, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to make sure you are following and subscribed to the Closing Table podcast wherever it is you get your podcasts. Also, please leave us a comment or review. It is the best no-cost thing you can do for the podcast, and it helps us grow and find more awesome listeners like you. Now back to the episode. Right. So when you're taking these people to coffee, because I hear a lot of real estate agents, say this, or this is part of a lot of people's stories, but I've never asked this, but I'll put it to you because I think you're going to be the person with the answer. What do you talk about? Like if an agent's like, God, everybody says take them to coffee, but like, then what?
Yeah. So very simple. And because I think still to this day, we're coming up on 6 years at this point. I still constantly say I feel like an outsider in this industry. I've not been doing that this long. But you just, at the core of everything is relationships. So you don't overcomplicate it. If we're sitting down to have coffee, I want to know all about Kat. I want to know, what do you do for like I invited you to this coffee, and the reason that I did is because I'm a local realtor, and part of my job is getting to know people in this community. I don't know that I'll ever be able to help you with buying and selling a house, but I might be able to learn more about the community or things you care about, and that could in turn help some of my clients down the road or people that I'm trying to service, right? So every time I went to coffee, I just learned all about them. Like I would ask them constantly questions. Tell me about what you do for a living. Tell me about your family. Obviously up front, telling them why I invited them to this coffee. And I would never spend any time talking about my business unless somebody asked. If somebody asked, then I would say, yeah, I'm really excited. I recently got licensed and I'm looking to grow a business that makes an impact here in the community. And I want to do that by serving the people in the community through our schools, through local charities, and even just through, one-on-one relationships. And that's why I wanted to get to know you. And I will tell you, some of those coffees that I had almost 6 years ago are still serving our business today. And a lot of those people never closed a deal with us, but they are walking, talking billboards for us because they know that our character was one of wanting to get to know them and not just looking for a transaction. And again, still some of those folks will message and say, hey, do you know somebody, because this is how our entire business is built. They'll go, do you know somebody that does this? Do you have a babysitter you trust? Do you have a contractor you trust? Where do you get, your dogs groomed? Like the craziest things. Or like, hey, I just need to know a general value on my house because we're going to sell it to my grandson. I just helped somebody do that recently. It's nice to become the go-to person because people trust you. That's what that coffee is about. The coffee is not about helping somebody buy or sell their house. It's about getting to know that person and continuing a relationship with them.
That's so great. Um, Speaking of kind of you mentoring, you and your husband have written a course.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So we have a handful of different digital downloads on different pieces of our business. One that's really big right now is different events, because we have grown through events tremendously. And events is just anything that's one to many. Because I think a lot of times folks will say, well, I don't want to do an event because that's just so much work. There's, all these details, and it is. Don't get me wrong. I thought they were very intimidating in the beginning. But an event is when you take your business and your brand and you stop going one to one, like a coffee, and you start going one to many. But one to many could be I'm sitting with 4 people at a breakfast, right? Or it could be I'm sitting with 4 people at a Bible study, or it could be any of those things. It also can be much larger events. But our business has evolved that way through events. So that's one of our pieces. But I got to a place because I really feel like, again, God foreshadowed this years ago. And I think it's my job to make sure that I pay it forward and I serve other people. Fun fact, before I ever got into real estate, when I was in corporate America, I thought about getting my license about 10 years prior. I was getting ready to take a new promotion, the last role that I was at the bank. And I thought, I don't really want to do this. Like it's a great role. It's more money, but this isn't really the direction I want to go. And I think a lot of us have probably had those pivots in life where we're like, this is the right thing to do, but I don't know that I want to do that. Right. And I called a fellow realtor that I knew actually from my hometown. And I'd followed them. I asked how they got started. And it was a lot of just terrible feedback. If you don't have $20,000 to put down in all your marketing, and if you don't have a year to live off of your saving, like this is not the role for it. Was a very doom and gloom kind of conversation. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Like we don't have the kind of money to live for a year without me collecting a paycheck. I don't have the kind of money to sink into all of this marketing. And so I didn't do it. And I took the position at the bank and I just went on my merry little way, constantly still thinking about real estate. So one of the things that when we got into real estate, I said I would always do is when somebody asked for help, that I'd always help them. And I think that I learned that that's kind of unique in our industry because a lot of people look at each other as competition instead of collaboration. And so I've always done that. I'll take hour-long plus phone calls with agents. But it did get to a place, even after my first year, where I had people reaching out and going, can you just tell me what the secret sauce is? Like, what's the easy button? How do I do this? I've been in business. I had an amazing call with somebody that I just really respected here in our community that said, I have been in this business for longer than you've been alive pretty much. And how are you doing, the kind of business that you're doing? And I wanted to share that with everybody. The hard part is the minute you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so I was saying yes and yes and yes to agents constantly, brokers and everyone else, having these phone calls, these Zooms, to literally open up my playbook and say, this is what I do on social media. This is what I do in the community. Here's all of it, and I didn't do it justice in the hour that I would spend with people most of the time. A lot of times they'd have questions afterwards. And so I finally said, I need to put this into a digital form, a booklet, a something, right? Because I found that the very thing that I was wanting getting into real estate was the options. And I was getting less and less options because I had less and less time. So I was constantly telling my kids to hold on, can't do that right now. And so the digital stuff that we actually at this point, we sell it now on our Stand store. It's not crazy expensive. I would have bought these all day long if somebody would have showed me how to do it versus spending the years learning it all myself. But I did that because I wanted to be able to give somebody a resource. And obviously anybody that goes in and they want to learn about events or they want to learn how to grow their business, I have listing guides, buyer's guides, for sale by owner guides. I have all of it, like everything that I do verbatim. But if they want time with me, I still give them time with me because I know that that's important as agent to agent kind of follow up. But the reason that we put those courses in place was just to free up, again, some of the reasons that we got into real estate was to free up those options to spend the time how we wanted.
Totally. And it's a little bit of working smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
If you have so many people coming to you for this one thing, it's about time you write about it or you make a course about it or something like that. And you're still providing your service, to those around you by giving them your time,
Right.
maybe after they've read the course.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's wonderful. And especially because your business is is not just about the business, but it is, about service. Like you mentioned in the beginning, like that was the whole kind of mission statement of your impact agents. And that takes time. So can we talk about maybe some of the ways you service your community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it has evolved over the years. In the very beginning, I'm sure that so I started on a team, and I'm sure that my team lead, God bless him, probably thought I was the worst hire he ever had because he brought me in and said, this is how we do business. And at that time in 2018, there was a lot of, we'll sell your house in 90 days or it's free, or there was different, I call them gimmicks, for lack of better words. And I was like, that's cool. I'm not doing any of that. And I said, instead, I want to I have this vision that I felt like God really put on my heart where I'm like, every time we close, I want to find out something through that process that's near and dear to our clients. And I want to find something in the community that I can either serve hours at to impact that cause or that financially I can donate part of my compensation back. And we still do that to this day. It looks a little different at times just because of the caliber of our business at this point. But that's what I did. I mean, I held up these big sweepstakes looking checks and, some of them would have $50 on it. Some would have a couple hundred. It would just depend on what the profitability of that closing was. But I made it a point to also then talk about what did that money do? Because, when we gave $50 to the Humane Society, or $50 to Lucky Day Animal, it fed, 10 animals and it made a huge difference, or it paid for a vet bill. I truly like to believe in the good in people. And I think that more people would, even the folks that don't have large means, I feel like they would give back in ways in the community, whether it's serving hours or donating $5-10 back here. But I think sometimes we have this what can little old me kind of attitude have, which is normal. I think a lot of us do that. We think we belittle the impact we can actually make in our community if I only have 15 minutes to give, or I only have $5 to give. But I think it's important for folks to see what that kind of impact can make. I think it's really hard sometimes when we see these large marketing campaigns and people see the big checks that have tens and twenties of thousands of dollars on them, or they see huge groups of people, that go out and spend 8 hours in an event. And we think, oh, but I can't do that. Like, I'm not capable of doing that. And so Impact Agents was born out of the concept of, one, making sure everybody knew that they can make an impact in their community. Number one. And number two was, I believe that every single strong real estate sale, purchase, every strong real estate economy in a community starts with having a strong community. Right? If we have a strong community, that means our schools, our churches, our nonprofits, all of those are strong. Our real estate is strong. And it's proof because you can find some cities that have, really devastation all the way around them. And you'll find these little pockets of these little townships or villages or even little parts of even a neighborhood that does really well. Back in 2008, there were a handful of these neighborhood or suburban areas that they actually charted. And they said, okay, the average house actually went down about 35% during 2008, during the collapse. But there were these weird little pockets where some of homes were not touched more than maybe 10%. Why was it? They had strong communities. They had strong churches, nonprofits, schools. They had strong community around them. And that's the entire idea behind impact agents. And that's what Ty and I work really hard to do. And we work hard with that, not just with our clients and our community, but also across the table. Like uh, I'd like to believe, and I don't want to take all the credit for it, but I see a lot of agents in our community doing this now. I see big brokers doing this now. I see other agents doing it. And I do think that agents as a whole have been a very generous group of people since inception. Many agents work tireless hours that clients never know about. They donate, so much of their time and money back. But I also don't think a lot of agents wanted to talk about it. I even had a agent tell me one time, she's like, I like to give back, but I don't like to brag about it. And I said, well, I don't take it as bragging. I think it's spreading good word. I think that seeing good and doing good allows other people to know they can share and do good as well. I think there's plenty of bad stuff out there that people share, and that's the social media aspect. But there's plenty of times that we share all the negative stuff that's happening, and it just can lead to more negative thought. And so we constantly put up there all the good things that we're doing in the community, because we hope that it catches on. And so far, knock on wood, it has. There's a lot of agents doing exactly what we do now in our own community, which is a blessing to our community and to our real estate here.
Yes. And I think you said so many good things in there. It's a testament to you that you're like, oh my gosh, please copy me. Please, more people, give your service,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody wins, when people are giving back to their community. And you touched on some other things. You said like, oh, okay, maybe we only donate $50 to the Humane Society, which can't compete with maybe somebody else, if you're starting off, but it gets 10 meals for dogs. So maybe you don't say how your monetary donation, maybe you just say, I fed 10 dogs today, and like that makes me feel really great. Or, there's ways you can spin it maybe that can make it feel less maybe advertisey or salesy, or like you're trying to make yourself look good. But I also think it inspires other people who are not agents, that maybe somebody else goes, oh man, how can I help feed the dogs
Right.
at the thing? What did you do?
Yeah.
And that it's not all about the money aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and now here again, almost 6 years later, I'm probably not that great at putting, in the beginning there is a marketing piece to it. I'm not going to sit here and hide behind that, but it was good marketing. I'm not just paying a marketing company thousands of dollars and not impacting something local in the meantime. Right. But, I love that, feeding 10 dogs. I'm totally going to steal that from you, Kat.
Oh yeah, it's just the reframe.
Right.
It's
I
spin. I
love
should work
that.
in marketing,
I absolutely love that. But I do think that at the core of it, your home is your largest material purchase of your life, or your largest material sale of your life, right? And it is just as important that you work alongside of somebody that I feel has some of the alignedness of what you want. Obviously, every agent that you're hiring that has their license, they should be looking out to be an advocate for you, to get you the most money or get you the best deal. Like, that should be a no-brainer. But to actually work with somebody, because it is a somewhat of an intimate journey. You're going over finances, you're talking about their home and everything. So you should work with somebody that like, and trust. And that's why I feel like what we did and continue to do and what we put out there in the world, it solves all those problems, because the only folks that come to us now and get referred to us are folks that are really looking for someone that those pieces of the community are important to them as well.
That's great. I also heard you speak in another interview about kind of helping someone find their cause. Um, and, I think this person liked
Mm-hmm.
baseball, right? And you were like, why not get involved in your local youth sports or stuff like that? Which I think is, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have just been sitting around like, ugh, animal rescues don't really speak to me. Recycling maybe doesn't really speak to me. And I think maybe people don't realize, like, you know, a youth
Mm-hmm.
sports, or there's so many options.
They're really, it's endless. I don't know, when agents will say they don't know where to start or they don't know where to go, I'm just thinking, all you got to do is literally walk outside your house, and I guarantee there's a million needs, right? You have schools, you have churches, you have nonprofits in your area, you have even for profits that need additional volunteers. um, in theory, all you need to do is figure out what interests you. And because I've had folks that say, well, gosh, I want to do what you do. And I want to go, I'm going to go do this and work with nonprofits. And I go, well, did you do that before? Because Ty and I have served for years before we were ever in real estate, right? We served on our local church. We were always part of like the, the roundup for Christmas for our food pantry in different places we lived. Like that was just part of our DNA. Like it is something that we're able to serve other people, and it selfishly fills our cup up. We absolutely love it, right? So if that wasn't something that was part of somebody's DNA before, or something that they want to do, then gosh, don't do it. Like you're going to hate it. That's going to be terrible. You're not going to want to keep doing it, right? But if you're somebody that says, okay, but every single Saturday or something, I go to trivia, and every Wednesday I go to the Parks and Rec. Like find things that you already do or would like to do, and that you would spend time at, even if you're not getting paid, because you won't be getting paid, right, in the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
what are those things, and gear your business around it? Because again, this is relationships. You're not just going there. And I've never once gone and helped at the food pantry and thought, oh my gosh, I'm here to find a buyer or a seller. Like that's not why I'm there. I am there to serve and do whatever it is that they need. And by showing them and the people in this area what your niche is, showing them your character, that you're going to show up, right? You're going to show up for them. You're going to show up for that, whatever that cause or that group is. That's what then later leads to referrals or to business. But I would never ever tell somebody to start in the field that we started in just to do it, because that doesn't make any sense, right? This guy, I remember you talking about his husband and wife team. They're amazing. They're in Northern Michigan. Shout out to them. If you ever have somebody in Northern Michigan, I'll tell you, Courtney and Josh up there are awesome. But they have two little ones, and so their life is busy. And he said, "Gosh, I just, I wish I." He literally, it was so funny. He said, "I wish I could find a way to just go and support our local T-ball and have that be beneficial someday for business." And I was like, oh my gosh, you can. Like, what are you doing? This solves everything, right? T-ball needs coaches. They need volunteers. They need people to bring juice boxes. Like, get yourself ingrained in that group. And so now, I mean, last time I knew that's exactly what they're doing, is they're serving in their community. You just got to find out what interests you. And if you have to, go to Facebook, find different groups that are on there, right? There's tons of groups at our fingertips.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think, it's like, what do you want to talk to people about? Like when you go out in the world, like, do you talk about sports? Do you talk about crafting? Like,
Right.
those are the people you're going to want to talk to anyway. Find them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because when you talk to those people about that common denominator, you will never have to you will never have to feel like you have to talk to them about real estate. Eventually they will ask you. When I hang out in, a handful of different entrepreneur groups, especially mom groups, and they'll have no problem asking me, but it's not what I sit there and talk about constantly. It's just constantly real estate. If I want to do that, I'm just going to talk to other agents, right? But yeah, I think that people make it harder than it needs to, and it will change. That's the other thing I always tell agents: just because you start with something doesn't mean you have to stay there. The charities and the causes that we started with, some of them we still work with, and some we don't. Some are a season, and that's totally fine. It's fine to go, oh my gosh, I feel really called to this one, but this time that I'm spending over here, I'm not necessarily enjoying as much. And so that it doesn't make sense for you to take up space someplace that you're not going to be a walking, talking billboard for either that business or that charity or that cause either. Like, I don't want to take up a space that they could have somebody else there that was super on fire for their cause.
I'd like to take just a moment and tell you about our sponsor. WindowStill provides premium real estate media for agents, builders, and property management companies nationwide. To learn more, visit windowstill.com. WindowStill, helping America find their next chapter. Now, back to the episode. Your business has blown up in a relatively short amount of time.
Yes.
You work with your spouse, you have, wonderful children. That's a lot to take on, and you've continued to grow and grow and grow, and I'm sure it's been a grind. So how, looking back, how are you moving forward? Like, what have you found to be tricky about the balance, especially, working with your spouse? Like, I'm sure sometimes it's maybe hard to turn off the business talk.
Yeah. So, well, I've determined balance is a complete myth. I don't know who ever talked about balance. It's not something that exists ever. And if I had balance, like my balance would be, I'd be on a beach all the time, just like on my computer doing real estate deals. But, working with my spouse, we get asked this question a lot, and we tend to attract a lot of husband and wife teams. We have a handful that we work with at other brokerages, and even that we've sponsored in our own brokerage. But for us, it came very naturally because in the very beginning we did something very important. And I'm not going to say that there's never little bumps to that, but one of the very best things you can do, this is probably for a partnership too, but especially with a husband and wife or partners, you're going to want to figure out whose role is what, right? And then stay in your own lane. Because early on, we sat down and we said, okay, everything that is systems in technology, that's Ty. Everything that is client facing and social media, that's Coti. Like marketing, social media, client facing, that is me 100%. Everything that's operational behind the scenes is totally Ty. That also fits our personalities. Ty is he's happy being, in the background. And I'm like, give me a stage and a microphone. I want to talk to all the people, right? So we knew that early on. And that's really how we operated completely. We co-owned a boutique brokerage here, and then we moved to a cloud base. And that was really our roles up until recently. And we reevaluate that. Just like you say, vision boards every year, we reevaluate our roles on an ongoing basis, especially if we add something to our business. We add it with the intent of going, okay, whose role is that going to be, right? If we're going to add this other piece to our, but who's going to be taking care of that? So recently Ty has started doing much more of the client relationship. Like he's always done the onboarding for our agents. So here's how you use your systems. Here's how you use MLS, all that. But now he is a lot more of the continuing to develop the relationships with our agents as well. And so that's newer for him, but it's also a role that he thrives in. And quite frankly, he's better at it than I am. He asked me a question and I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. And he'll like spend time breaking it down and really making sure that the agent has all the time that they need. Whereas I'm continuing to still prospect and continuing to be out there. So I don't have as much time to focus on that. I will say the hardest part is shutting it off. We both really love what we get to do. We both love, and it's funny because he did not really sign up for this. Wasn't what Ty was not the kid that wanted to have a house, right? And so he did not ever think real estate was in his future, to the point where when his job got eliminated, I said, I'm either going to hire somebody or we're going to do this together. So would you rather have me paying somebody while you go look for a different role, or we do this together? And that's when he got licensed. And actually he's more licensed than I am at this point. He has his broker's license and I do not. So we do really well because we know what our roles are. And I will say the other thing is I never, this is we had like a mentor session with another husband and wife, and we said, what's going on? And they said there was complications in this one piece of their business. And I said, walk us through it. Well, it was really one of their roles, but the other one kept kind of dipping their toes back in and saying, oh, but I have an opinion on this. I want you to do it like this. And I was like, neither one of us can be each other's boss. Like, that's just not how it works. And we very much probably the opposite. So we try very hard to serve one another. That's actually how we decided we had to figure out what our roles were. Because in the beginning, we kept trying to do things to make the other one's life better in the real estate part of our life. And we would double up on doing some things and other things would fall through the cracks. So we said, we have to figure out, these are all your roles, these are all mine, and we stay in our lane, right? We communicate on it constantly. But I don't ever, his decisions that he makes, I don't ever second guess him. That's his role in our business. To me, I always think when husband and wives have this issue, or, business partners have this issue, I think when I was at JP Morgan and there was a decision and I was the head of national sales training, I never went to Jamie Dimon and was like, I don't think you're making the right decision with this bank, right? So why would you, as the CEO of your business, go over to the CFO of your business and start criticizing the role that they have? You wouldn't. So you shouldn't.
I think that's great. And I think that's probably not to say that you guys can't consult each other. It's just like maybe you don't there are things that you can handle, each on your own, you know?
Absolutely. Sorry. Um,
Oh, no,
so
it's okay.
we definitely still, I mean, we communicate constantly. That's part of the problem, is being able to shut it off. I truly think that most of the time when husband and wives do this role together, or two business partners do it together, we overcompensate how we think we're doing our role, and we under how we think the other person is doing their role, right? But the reality is, I don't even know what all it takes to do his role at this point in time. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like all our systems in the back office, somebody was talking about the other day, and I'm like, I've never even logged into that. I've never even been there. How could I turn around and criticize the role that the job duties he's doing when I've never done it, right? So I think it is good to communicate. It's good to ask questions. And it's also good to, I mean, we have additional help at this point in time too. If there's things that bog you down in your business, that's why these roles are so incredibly important to constantly look at, because if too much gets on one plate, you have to say, okay, when do we need to hire help? Uh, we've had a full-time admin for years now at this point in time that has to take everything that's not on my plate or Ty's plate. That's our full-time admin's plate, right? And I think it also, for many folks that are in partnerships together in a business, is maybe one thing that keeps you sane, is that you have this middle person that you can say, okay, I just need them to handle XYZ in our business and not have to worry about it.
It's funny, this notion of turning it off. I maybe that might be a myth for some people too. Listening to you talk about it like more and more, if you're enjoying it, right? If nobody's getting bogged down by the conversation, do you have to focus so hard to try and like turn it off? And not only that, but if you're having this conversation around your children, are you not then modeling entrepreneurship for them, modeling like healthy problem solving, all of these like cool things that they get to see firsthand?
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope so. Ty and I both went to private colleges, and I will tell you, the days that we constantly encourage our kids to like run a business or do something on this, I can't, I lost count. But yeah, it is hard to turn it off. And it's funny because I think, if I'm being brutally honest, a lot of times Ty will start to tell me all the things that he's done on like the operations or systems side. And I'm like, let's just not talk about business right now. Like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And then he'll want to talk about, you know, listings or pendings or clients. And I'm like, okay, I can talk about that. Because again, that's my, I love talking about that. Right. Um, but it is definitely hard. And it's so fluid. I mean, it's something that in passing we talk about constantly at this point. Um, you're right. If it's not bogging anybody down, I think it's absolutely, we both enjoy that piece of it. I do think, just like for anybody though, our what we do for a living. I mean, this was true when I was in banking. This is true when he was in supply chain. What we do for a living so often defines who we are. And obviously, realtors, we would love that, to be like, oh, everybody define me by being a realtor and know who I am. But I think the challenge is we want to work really, really hard to make sure that's not why everybody just knows us, right? We want them to know our character. And that's true for like spouses. Like, I don't want us to just look at each other as business partners. Like, we want to be able to have that ongoing relationship that's beyond that. But it is incredibly hard because it takes up a good amount of the time.
I can imagine. Um, so because you've also expanded your business into a title company, correct? And you own a rental
Mhm.
property. You've talked a lot about setting yourselves up for the future, and I'm sure there's a lot of your different experiences that have funneled into that, kind of coming from a more corporate workplace where you have 401k or pension or whatever, and then going into real estate where they're like, you figure it out. You've spoken a lot about the ways you and your family are setting yourselves up for future success. So can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, I think that um, it, I wish that there was an overall meeting of sorts, just one-stop shop for anybody that has an entrepreneur mind and wants to start a business, because there's so much that you don't know that you don't know. And I don't know how many times I said when I was starting, if somebody will just tell me what to do, I'll do it. Like, just tell me how to get there, tell me what to do, I'll do it. And there's many people that are just like me, that they will work their tails off if you just tell them exactly what to do or position themselves financially. I went to a retreat, I think it was 2 years into being in business, and I sat in a breakout session, and it completely changed my life, because what they talked about was how to leverage debt in order to build assets. And nobody had talked to me like that before. And here I was thinking I was pretty cool. You know, I'm doing a lot of transactions. I'm like killing it. I thought I was like one of the smarter people in the room, and I felt so dumb. But in that moment, I'm like, this is going to change our life, because they completely changed how I viewed everything. You know, I grew up poor. And so I thought, well, if you don't have cash to be responsible, you don't buy it, right? And here we were constantly saving. And I was like, when we get enough money, then we're going to buy another property. And that's when we'll do it. And we'll look for something that we can, like Airbnb or medium-term rental or something like that. So we had a huge amount to put down. But when I left there, I had the whole conversation, which, you know, secondary hand conversations to like a friend or a partner or something like that never come off the same way. But I came home and told my husband, I'm like, here's what I learned and here's what we're going to do. And so then we were off to the races with buying our first property. And that changed 100% of how I look at it. And I'm not encouraging a bunch of people to go into a bunch of debt, but I am encouraging people to change the way that they look at leverage debt, an asset, a thing that grows, right? If I had it to do over again, I would tell every single person to just buy any house right now. I know that sounds crazy. Like, don't buy your dream house, especially your first time home buyer. You're not going to buy your dream house as a first time home buyer, but buy a house, period. Because historically, it shows us that that will appreciate. You know, there's only 2 times in history where housing prices ever went down. Even during recessions, housing prices go up. That has actually, housing's 25% of GDP. Housing doesn't actually mean, or recession doesn't mean that the housing prices will go down. But if I had to do over again, I would house hack my way to being a multimillionaire by already at this stage in my life through housing. Buy that first house though. Then when you're at 2 years, you can rent it out if you want, or you can pull out that appreciation. You can, you know, buy your next place. But if you rent that house out and it covers the mortgage, you can pull the equity out to buy that secondary house. And you should continue to do this for as long until you get to that dream house that you do want, right? Especially with the platforms that are out there anymore, between VRBO, Airbnb, Furnish Finders, even just community pages. If you are able to find a house that cash flows at a short-term or medium-term rental rate, you would be crazy not to be purchasing as much real estate as possible. Especially, many people may not know this, but there are vehicles now even for it that are called DSCR loans that allows people to go in, and you do not have to have, all you have to have is the down payment, which can be as little as the 15% down. And you don't have to show your income to cover it. You have to show that the rental potential will cover it. Because some people will say, gosh, I've saved and I have this money to put down on this house, or I can get gifted the money or whatever their circumstances are. But I don't, you know, I'm just making $60,000 a year. I can't do that and still have my current mortgage. Well, yes, you can, because you just have to be able to prove that the rental income, which the lender helps you with. But if I had the knowledge then that I had now, we'd be probably sitting on 100 properties, because there's no way I would have let the years go on. And I know everybody looks at the current market and thinks, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But the reality is, you know, when rates start to come down, prices are going to go up again. And so do you want, you know, that $300,000 or $400,000 house? And especially if you're in the investment game, do you want that $80,000 or $100,000 house now at 7%? Or do you want it once it all of a sudden doubles, but you know, it's down to 5%, but you're still paying more for that house? So, but yeah, I apologize. Your first question, if I, if I knew then what I knew now, I would do everything and I'd do it faster. I know everybody probably says that, right? We would have all invested in Apple back in the day, and everything else. But I don't miss the corporate America structure at all, because I don't feel like the feeling of safety and security that that's a lot of folks feel more comfortable with. That makes me concerned. I've lived through layoffs. I've lived through downsizing. I've known when I was a, almost irreplaceable person at a company that they'll get rid of you tomorrow. I would rather work more, harder for myself with the upside potential than work for somebody else. And there's so many options out there to gain wealth right now. And especially, last thing I'll say on this, because I could talk about gaining wealth during this time. And this time right now, when a market feels rough, that's when more millionaires are made instead of good times. Everybody thinks of the good times, the great times, right? Like, oh gosh, a couple years ago we had 3% rates and houses were flying off the market. Right. But actual asset growth and wealth growth was at kind of an all-time low. If you think about it, people were gaining in their home quality, but they were not gaining actually in their asset and their wealth, like what they had long-term longevity. Right now is at times where actual millionaires and billionaires are made.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a cool thought, especially because I know a lot of people have a lot of complicated, verging on negative feelings about maybe the market right now. And yeah, in corporate America, it's not what it used to be, not in a post-COVID world. So yeah, why not bet on yourself?
Right.
I think
Right.
that's a really beautiful sentiment. What are some of the things you're looking forward to this year? It doesn't have to be related to your business.
Super simple things, like we just got new floors put in our lake house, and so we bought a home on the lake up north, and we knew it was going to need some TLC, and so we've taken care of all the outside, and we got new floors in it, and we just got our boat out last week, and our pool at our house opens up in another week. So I'm just really excited for summer, is where I'm at. We have a handful of trips scheduled this year. I started off this year with a big anticipation to focus on my health and focus on just really things that bring me joy. And so I've been on this real path of making sure that number one every day is focusing on, what kind of workout or what kind of walk kind of thing I can get in, nutrition. And so that has been great and going well, and just continuing to focus on what downtime that I get to spend with our kids. And, I know you said not business, but we are picking up some properties this year. So I'm very excited about that as well. I'm excited to share them because I think they'll be really good for the community as well here. So I think it's gonna be a great year. I'm also, I mean, I know it's a hot topic, but I'm excited to watch our political climate like have this whatever moment it's going to have. I think that there's just a lot of anticipation for it. I think it's going to affect a good amount of just this. I feel like a lot of us are holding our breath in a lot of industries, and I'm ready for that to be over so that we can all move on.
Certainly ready to exhale,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Well, I love that. And I think, your business is tied to your personal life. So I think it's totally fine to, have things you're looking forward to in both arenas. And I'm so excited to see what you do next, and I'm excited to keep up with your properties. And everybody loves a little before and after, so don't keep us waiting on Instagram. Me and the other 22,000 people want to know. Well, Coti, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Do you want to tell people how they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram or on Facebook are the two main things that I personally always answer. And um, just making sure, obviously, COTI, because everybody tends to go and spell it
Yes.
incorrectly. But yeah, that is the biggest way. Or if you Google my name, you will pop up if you're here in the community. And we're always available to help serve anyone with any questions that they might have.
Awesome. And we'll link your socials in the show notes below. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been The Closing Table, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm Kat Schooler. If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure you are following us on Apple or Spotify. And if you're part of our YouTube audience, don't forget to subscribe. If you do subscribe, put in the comments, I've subscribed, and I will reply back to each one. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.